Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Chats with Chaudhry. I hope you're safe and well. Today, I'm being delighted to be joined by Cindy Novak-DeLaurell from Bristol, Myer, Squibb. And we're going to be talking about information technology and, more importantly, the connected lab and the digital lab. And Cindy, you might think, is in Hawaii or some exotic place because she's got palm trees behind her. But actually, you're in Seattle, aren't you, Cindy? How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me here, Rizwan. And yes, I am just outside of Seattle, Washington. I'm actually currently in Everett, and my office is based in beautiful downtown Bothell.
Oh, well, I've not had the pleasure of going to Seattle, so I really don't know where that is. But anyway, well, thank you for joining me. And the reason Cindy is joining me today is that Cindy speaks at a lot, and I do mean a lot, of conferences and events which are around future labs, smart labs, labs of the future, connected labs, paperless labs, digital labs. In fact, I don't know how many you spoke at last year, but quite a few. Because every time I look at the conference I was going to, you were one of the speakers there, actually. So,
I lost count. I stopped counting after I think about 5. So, right. And I threw in a few at the end of the year.
And the reason that she's in our speaking today is because I actually noticed that Cindy was speaking at another conference coming up in February, and I might get this wrong because there's so many and I've mixed them all up now in my own head, but I don't know if that's Smart Labs or Future Labs or something around that, which is coming up in February. Which event are you speaking at in February? Let's give that a plug.
That one is Smart Lab, so the US based Smart Lab conference.
Fantastic. And we'll put a link to that actually above this video when we finish. But so I thought this would be a great opportunity, as Cindy does speak to so many of these events, to actually ask her what are some of the most common questions she gets asked at all these conferences, and sort of try and answer some of those questions for you guys who are interested in lab connectivity and the labs of the future, particularly since everybody's been in lockdown and nearly everyone I've spoken to about the last year and looking ahead to 2021 has all talked about how digitalization and technology has been pushed to the forefront because people have now had to work smarter, faster, and also at home. So they've had to find ways around and use technology to get to where we are today. So Cindy, thank you very much for joining me. It's lovely for you to join me from the lovely Seattle with the palm trees behind you. My first question is, though, for those people not familiar with you and your background, if you could just give a very quick overview of your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I have been in the pharma world for nearly 30 years. It's kind of hard to believe that when I stop and think about it. This year is actually 30 years in pharma and biotech. I started off as a quality engineer. So I was in the lab space initially and moved within about the first 5 years, I moved into IT and supporting quality. I've done most of my career has been involved with LIMS, LES, ELN, that type of space. And when I came to Bristol Myer, I actually moved over a little bit. So I still work with the LIMS folks and the ELN and MES, but I actually support all the individual lab systems that are integrated with the instruments. And so it's an entirely different perspective, but all of my background with LIMS and LES and ELNs and whatever acronym of the week it is, really comes into play because I have an understanding of how they're consuming that data and the importance of having really good quality, available data that meets all the data integrity rules and, fair data and all of our wonderful favorite acronyms out there, and just understanding what that need is. And so it really, all those years in the LIMS world has really been beneficial as I've been really come up to speed here at BMS.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some of the common questions you get, and just so you know, viewers, Cindy kindly sent me these questions over before we started this interview, so I'm going to feed them to her. She's not going to just send those questions out to me. But the first question I've got is, what do we mean by digital lab? Because it can have so many different meanings to so many different people.
And I think that you actually just hit the nail on the head. So for me, it's a little bit different than a lot of folks you hear at the conferences. A lot of the people who speak at conferences are coming from the R&D space. And so they're talking about full automation and robotics and all this really high-end data mining and things like that are fantastic and I would love to do. My side of the fence is the quality and manufacturing side. So it's a lot more regulated, a lot more, you have to validate everything. There's a lot more to it to make it work. So my view of the digital lab space is a little bit different, but not entirely. So I look at it, and for me, it's end to end, let's get rid of paper. And I'll share a funny story about paper, getting rid of paper in a moment. But it's anything from getting my users access to my instruments or my LIMS or whatever system, having that digital all the way through to reporting, to passing data between systems, and being able to report out to agencies or anybody else that needs it without having to print out a piece of paper.
Right.
And interestingly enough, my last company was Takeda. And at Takeda, I was involved in a project that was digital from day one. We built a brand new facility in Ireland. Gorgeous place, wonderful facility. Day one was, we will be digital. We are not going to have paper systems. And we were fairly successful. We probably were 85, 90% successful when I left. So really fantastic project, great vision from the beginning. Fast forward to when I joined BMS back in May of last year. And when I first came on site, and I've only been on site a couple of times for orientation and such things because of course, COVID. And my team said, so here's the tray where our forms are turned in. And I'm like, wait, what? And we have, for certain aspects, we have paper forms. And to me, it was just amazing because I haven't had to touch a paper form in years for most things. And we're working on it. It's going to be a while until we get rid of that. But to me, that's a very big thing, is we shouldn't have to worry about handling paper. Paper gets lost, paper fades. You don't have that traceability long term.
Sure.
If I want to find a record from 20 years ago, going to a paper logbook or a paper form isn't going to work. It needs to be digital. And so for me, that's really where we want to be for the digital world and what that looks like in my universe of the quality and manufacturing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that, I mean, do you think though, because of lockdown, you just said you joined when it was lockdown anyway, that's helped you speed up that process though, because people have suddenly realized that, look, we're all working remotely. We can't all have access to the paper at the same time now. We can't pass it to each other physically. So we do have to move it on to sort of electronic versions of everything.
You would think. It has sped up part of it. One of the things, and it surprises me, and to give an understanding of where my site in particular is coming from, BMS is a huge organization, sure, and with varying levels of integration. My site is a fairly young site. We were Juno Therapeutics and started, probably 7 years ago now or so, somewhere around there. So we're less than 10 years old at our site. And then we were bought by Celgene, and then we were bought by BMS. And so it's a very young site. And when they started, there wasn't this concept of building things digital from the get-go.
Sure.
And so things like one of the things COVID has done for us in the lockdown is, we need a way to digitally sign because our managers aren't on site. Now, my team is on site. I have team members on site, sure, every day because they have to. They're hands-on. They're supporting the instruments and the computers in the labs. I don't have to be on site. I'm in management. They don't need me there. They don't want me there on site getting in the way. And so they needed a way to send me those forms and have me digitally sign them, because I'm not going to sit here, print it out, sign it, scan it, send it back.
Sure.
And so we now at least have that aspect of tools that, well, we're going to digitally sign this and just leave it all electronic and not have to print more than the one sheet of paper. The best part is because I'm always promoting this, my team members are picking up on the thought. And I literally yesterday had one of them say, we've got these paper forms, and they fill them out initially on paper and we get this hard copy. He said, but why don't I scan it and attach it to the ticket that says I'm setting up this user account or making a change? And then we have a digital record and we don't have to keep that piece of paper. And so my team is starting to think that way, which is great because it means that they're actually listening to my philosophy and what I'm sharing, what I'm saying. And that to me is a huge win for how we're going to operate at the site.
Good. All right. So one of the questions that you get often asked is, what is the greatest challenges in achieving a digital lab? So what are the greatest challenges in achieving a digital lab?
Adoption. And that's kind of what I was just getting at. And you know, it was a nice lead in, is getting people to understand the benefits. It's easy to say, I've always done it that way. We've all been there. We've all done that. We've all spewed that out in our conversations. Well, but we've always done it this way. It works. So getting people to understand the benefits and to adopt that is really a huge challenge, because there's always a reason not to. I don't have time. It costs a lot of money, and it does cost a lot of money to do it initially, but your return on investment is huge. But it's always, I don't have time, I don't have money, we don't have XYZ resources. And that really is the biggest challenge. And finding those champions within the site, within the organization.
Sure.
Once you find those champions, then that helps to shift and really get people to start understanding the value. But it is really hard. I've been really, from the minute I joined the organization, I've been talking about digital. I've been talking about all these things we need to do to make our lives better.
Sure.
Here at the Juno site. And people hear it and they hear it and they hear it and they don't do anything. And they're starting to understand. I'm basically saying, we're going to do this now. And they've had to just sort of go, oh, well, wait, how does that affect me? So here's all the positive things. Yes, there's some challenges with that, but here's all the positive things that it's going to improve your life. And, you know, we've got a system that you can't remote into because it locks out the actual users.
Sure.
There's a great tool out there. I'm like, you know what? All our other sites are using this tool. Why don't I install that tool, and then I can support you remotely? I don't have to come into the lab. I don't have to gown up. You don't have to escort the new guys. We can access it remotely. It's not going to disrupt you. And it's little things like that. You get the low-hanging fruit. But I had to get them past the idea that, oh my gosh, if you remote in, you're going to break my system. Because we did it once, you're going to do it every time, obviously. And so really the biggest challenge is that change management and getting people to really understand that it is the direction that we're going to go in the future. If you don't make that change, we're going to get left behind. And it doesn't matter how good your medicines are, how good your technology for manufacturing is. If you can't keep up with the rest of it digitally, you're not going to survive in today's world.
And talking about champions, does that champion have to come from senior management, or is it someone on the ground floor who is actually using, or I mean, realistically is a combination of all of them, really, isn't it? Because you need someone to champion who's got the budget or who's got the influence senior management, but then you also need champions to influence the co-workers to say, look, this is a good idea, I'm doing it, you should do it as well.
I like having both, but I actually like my initial champion coming from the floor.
Right.
And the reason for that is that if it comes from senior leadership, yes, you get the budget, and yes, you can put it in place, but people won't use it if they don't have to. If it comes from the ground up,
sure, and
it comes from the guys on the floor and the guys and gals in the labs, in manufacturing, they say, there's this really cool tool, and if I do it this way, I don't have to do X, Y, Z. They show their buddy. Their buddy's like, wait, how do I get that? And it just has this whole organic growth and acceptance. And if it comes from there, and then they go to senior leadership and say, hey, you know what? We've got these really cool tools we want to be able to use. It's a lot easier to get the funding. If it comes from both directions at the same time, that's ideal because you get the funding and the adoption at the same time. Right. But I actually really like having the organic growth from the floor up.
Right. And then this leads on to the next question, which is obviously, if you're getting it from the floor up, how can you justify that significant cost that a digital lab or creating a digital lab will be? You know, how do you justify that to those senior people who are, particularly the budget counters, who are always looking at the bottom line in an Excel spreadsheet and don't always equate the numbers to what the reality is on the ground?
Yeah, the bean counters. Yeah, and that's probably
My apologies
one
to
of
any accountants out there, by the way. My son's an accountant as well, so I don't mean to be
the,
derogatory. So there you go.
Hey, you know what? The bean counters have their place, to be fair,
Yeah,
because they
sure.
do keep us honest. But it's really, it's how you build the business case. And that's really hard. I've gone back, and a good example was at Takeda. I think we rewrote the same business case for replacing limbs. We had limbs. It was 25 years old. I put it in, left the company, came back, and they were using the same limbs.
Right.
So, you know, that is very telling. But we wrote the business case 4 times to replace it. And you get somebody that says, okay, yeah, this is a good idea. The business might say, yes, it's a good idea. We want to do this. And it always gets held up at the funding piece of it, or a merger, or a divestiture, you know, and these things disrupt it. So your business case is important. Really making sure your business partners, as an IT rep, my business partners have to be aligned. And if they're not aligned, they're not going to have my back when I go to senior leadership and say, I need $3 million for this digital project, or however much it might be. You know, and the larger the number, the harder it is to get that money.
Oh, sure.
And so what you do then is you start with low-hanging fruit. And I'll give you an example in my current workspace. We use a tool called Altiris. It's, I know a lot of folks out there are going to be very familiar with Altiris. It's a great asset management tool for pushing out patching and just doing your asset management for day to day. My particular site does not have this tool yet. And my colleagues at other sites have been in the process of rolling it out. And almost from the minute I got here, like, great, so when do I get this? When do I get this? When do I get this? How come I'm having to patch things manually? I've got 200 and some odd instruments and computers that I have to go and patch manually when we have a critical patch. That takes me a week. And if it's something that's really critical that can stop the business, that's not acceptable. And so you take that low-hanging fruit going, look, it's going to take me 3 months and not a lot of money. And the benefit of this is massive. And my time and my resources, our compliance, and just keeping our business running. And so you start with little things like that. You build, and especially being new in the organization, I have to build that reputation that, yes, okay, yeah, you hired me because I know how to do this stuff. But here's the proof that I can do this and I can make it work. And it made our lives better here at Juno. And so it's really a matter of take that low-hanging fruit, do little jobs at first, little projects, get the little things that, ooh, let's integrate a MET1 with LIMS. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. Other sites have done it. Let's leverage what they've done. You make it work. Okay, that worked. What else can we integrate now? And now it turns into a much bigger thing. And the business is asking for it, not IT. And that's the other big thing. When IT asks for it, because IT wants to do this project, it's a lot harder to get that funding.
Sure.
When the business comes and says, we want to do X, Y, Z, much easier to get that funding. And it's usually shared funding between IT and quality, which really helps.
Well, you mentioned vendors there actually, and I know a lot of vendors will be watching this now because I've got you on, so they'll be wanting to hear what you have to say. So here's an opportunity to say, well, what do you look for though in a vendor? Because there's loads of vendors that, I mean, I'm sure you get pitched all the time with people, some new technology or whatever they want to talk. So from your point of view, what's the checklist you have when you're looking at a vendor? I know it's going to vary from technology to what and the application, but in general, what are you looking for from a vendor?
Probably aside from obviously the technology that they have to offer.
And it meets your needs.
Let's
assume, let's take it as the technology meets your needs. So take that into, assume that's the case.
The first thing I do is I want references. Obviously, I want to know that they've gone out and they understand the pharma world, and they understand not just the R&D side of the pharma world, but the quality and manufacturing side.
Right.
Because what will happen a lot of times is they're used to dealing with R&D, and it's somewhat of a free-for-all. And they come over to my side. I'm like, okay, wait, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You have to do it this structured way. So I want to know that they have that understanding.
Right.
So good references, good understanding of the GXP side of things. And it's about the personalities. It's about the willingness. Some of the best companies I've worked with are the small ones.
They'll go the extra mile, that's why.
They're motivated. They're motivated. But it's really about that personal touch. And I get a lot of these guys that I've worked with in the past. There's one in particular, I've worked with these guys in past companies, and I stay in touch with them. Not that I'm using them right now, but I want to, or I might want to. I want to promote them, but I want to stay in the loop. And that's been a really big thing. Or I hook them up with my R&D side of things. You know, SciBytes is a great organization. They're a great company. I don't necessarily have a need for them with what I do day to day, but my peers at other sites in R&D might. Right. So it's, hey, have you looked at these guys? Have you talked to these guys? Have you talked to BSSNs? Have you talked to, everybody's talked to the Agilents and the Thermos and the, you know, all of those. But I can tell you as an example, and I won't mention the vendor because they're a very large vendor, but I had worked with them in the past, went to, I forget which conference it is now, went to a conference, tried to interact with them directly, face-to-face, wanted a chance to look at their latest product. Was completely ignored, couldn't get the time of day from them. I mean, I couldn't even get their rep to talk to me. And I've been dealing with them off and on for years. And I left my card and I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I don't have time to wait. I'm going to keep going, doing what I'm doing. A couple months later, I get a phone call from them going, oh, so we got your card. We talked to you at this. I said, no, you don't understand. You didn't talk to me. And it really, for a long time, it took a long time before I even wanted to have a conversation with them. Because especially if you're a big vendor, I understand you can pick and choose, but don't get too cocky about picking and choosing who your customers are going to be and who you talk to and who you don't. And don't assume that because you and I have talked in the past that I'm just going to be willing when I go to the next company to just assume that you have what I need.
No,
new company, new needs.
Of course it is, yeah, 100%.
And so it's really, that's really what it's about. It's about the people behind the company and how they interact with potential clients.
Great. Well, vendors, if you're watching this, take note, because I've just helped you out there by giving you some free advice from Cindy. So there you go. All right. So looking ahead, we're into a new year, obviously, and we were talking about, as I mentioned earlier, COVID has pushed a lot of companies now to look at what they're doing in terms of digitalization and so on. So what do you think the future holds for pharma in terms of digitalization? It's a really huge question, I know, and I don't expect you to spend hours talking, but you could spend hours, I'm sure you could, talking about that, but just trying to keep it short and sweet. What do you think the future holds this year going forward now for pharma, you know, with the advent of COVID and the way people, pharma companies are moved towards digitalization?
I think really the biggest thing, and we've been seeing it for the past year and we'll continue to see it this year, is the push to, of course, integrate and digitalize the instrument to your larger enterprise systems, your LIMS, your MES, your ELNs. It's interesting because a lot of people comment that, oh, well, we won't go back into the office. And I think what we will see going forward is a hybrid version of that, where right now most of us are work from home, but I don't think that it will be a full work from home model by the end of the year. I think that it'll be 70-30, maybe 60-40 split between the office and your home office. And I think that that's a healthy split. So the people that are going into the labs and that have to be there on site all the time are going to take advantage of that. But you're going to see the scientists, man, I can start my HPLC from here. I can sit and have my cup of coffee. I can, take care of getting my kids ready for school, get them started with their Zoom classes or whatever they're doing. I can do all these things, but I can start my run at the same time or check on my run. You're going to see a lot more of that become the norm. And right now it's not, it's getting there. And you see it more on the R&D side, but you're going to see it on the quality side. And we see it right now where certain instruments, my lab techs. So all the folks in quality say, you know what, I want to be able to remote into my machine from home and check on my run or check on this. You know, obviously I can't physically put a sample on there, but I can check on how it's doing. I can check my results. I can, you know, when my run is done, I can check those results. I can send it off without ever stepping foot into the office. That's going to become the norm by the end of the year, I think, for a lot of organizations. And I think that that's a very good thing. I think that's a strength that we can all leverage, because it, you know, we all talk about work-life balance and how important that is. And we've all learned just how important that is in the last year. This really gives you that flexibility, because I can start my day at 6 o'clock. I can take a 2-hour break to get kids ready for school or whatever, or go run an errand. I can work for a few more hours. I can go make dinner for the family, come back, work for a couple of hours, and it becomes a much easier thing. And I can work when it suits me, still get in a productive 8 to 10 hour day, which is kind of a scary thing to think about, but it is kind of the normal here in the US, and still get the job done, get product out. And I think ultimately that will help us get product to the patient faster, because you find that we're all working all hours of the day, and you're going to lose, unless you're on the manufacturing floor, you're going to lose this concept of shift work to a very large degree, I think, where right now it's a traditional 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 kind of thing. I think that model is going to morph into a 24/7 model that I work when it suits me, and it needs to happen to get the job done. So it'll become a lot more flexible.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, I work from home anyway, so I don't care anymore. But I used to worry, but I always wanted to work from home as much as possible. Or I was traveling anyway most of the time. But yeah, I think you might well be right. And one question I ask a lot of people, I've been running a series this January and at the end of December, looking back at 2020 and looking at 2021. And there was one question I asked everybody, and I haven't asked you, so I'll ask you: how would you describe in one word 2020?
Chaotic.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Okay, now just looking ahead, and this is your chance to plug your presentation in February. So what are you speaking about? Can you remember what the title of your presentation is? Because yeah, I bet it's a long title.
If you give me a moment, I will pull it up. I'm actually doing 2 panel discussions.
Are you? All right.
Yes. So the first one is I'm doing a virtual roundtable about securing buying to move toward Lab 4.0 in your business. So we were talking about that earlier. Right. So that's on the first day, that's on the 16th. And then the other one, let me just pull this up, is a panel discussion exploring applications of emerging technology to accelerate innovation and transform the scientific lab. That's a mouthful.
And this is at Smart Labs USA, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Fine, fantastic. Well, they'll be happy that I've given them a plug as well in this interview. So there you go. So I'll put that up there. Well, look, Cindy, I won't take any more time, but that's been really interesting. Thank you very much for taking time to talk to me. It's always lovely to talk to people who are at the sharp end using the equipment. I talk to a lot of vendors as well, so that's why I know what they're doing, and it's always great to get the end user's perspective as well. So I appreciate you being so honest and sharing your expertise and knowledge with me today. And I hope you have lots of sunny weather in Seattle eventually at some point.
I think the sun comes out in April.
Well, you can always look at your virtual screen with all the palm trees, so at least that'll make you feel a bit better. So that'll be
there
good.
You go. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a great pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
No, I loved it. And hopefully we can do it again maybe later in the year. We can get an update on how things are progressing as well. So that'd be lovely to do. So until then, I wish you, your loved ones, a fantastic 2021. Happy, healthy, and successful. And to you viewers, I hope you found that useful. Now, Cindy is going to be presenting at Smart Labs USA, so the link will be above there. So if you're going to be there, check out the panel discussions. You've now seen how she's so passionate about the subject. You have to listen into the panel discussions now. But if you can't make it, or you're not registering for that particular conference, I'm sure there'll be lots of other conferences as well. Or if you've got any questions based on what Cindy said today, then I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them. So put some comments below the video, and I'm sure Cindy would like to answer them, or message directly. I mean, that's what I did, which is why she's talking to me now. So there you go. So you can do that as well. But until then, As always, Cindy, it was lovely talking to you. I really appreciate it. I'll catch up with you soon, and I'll catch up with everybody else as well soon. Until next time, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Cheers.